Hello, everyone. Today, the topic is fieldwork and research, which is a bit of a combination of two other topics. As you know, this was originally going to be two separate weeks of the syllabus, but then we smushed them into one. And so it was going to be the anthropology and travel week, and then also the one about mechanics of doing a fieldwork project. So we're kind of smushing them together, but they actually go together really well, as we will see, because it really centers around this idea of ethnographic fieldwork. What do we mean by that, and where did it come from? And one of the things we'll see is how A, it is a form of travel itself, and B, how it and more generally, anthropology was really inspired by travel to begin with. So we'll talk about that. And then once we've kind of learned all of that interesting intellectual food for thought, I'm pretending to I don't know, eat an apple or something. Anyways, food for thought. Then on the second half of the lecture, we will be talking all about basically what does a fieldwork project really look like, and more specifically, some tips and pointers on research design. So that's where we're going. Now, this is a quote from the reading you did, the Leet and Swan reading. They say any presence of tourism was ignored in early anthropological publications, reflecting ambivalence. So kind of like a bit cringy. Anyways, reflecting ambivalence that stemmed from embarrassing similarities between anthropologists and tourists, right? And from negative impacts of tourism on indigenous communities and material remains of past societies. So kind of they make this point that, nowadays we have a lot of anthropologists who do study tourism, but early on in anthropology, you had, anthropologists almost never mentioning it. Probably a lot of different reasons, as they suggest, right? One of which being that they wanted to sort of as accurately as possible capture and present sort of the truth of like these traditional cultures. And then if like there's a bunch of tourists running around in your fieldwork site, that makes it seem like you're not presenting a view of a culture that's really traditional. And so maybe that kind of felt threatening or something, to acknowledge that interconnectedness, that people were already very much affecting each other's cultures by the time anthropologists were sort of starting to roll around. But anyways, there's also this interesting idea, though, about similarities of anthropologists and tourists. So I want you to keep that in your brain, because that's going to be really relevant here in a minute. By the way, this is a picture of Gladys Reichert. Gladys Reichert is one of my, anthropologists that I really, really dig. So she never said tourists, disgusting. I just needed like a picture of an early anthropologist that looked like they might be annoyed by something. And this picture fit well, especially because we talk about her later in the lecture. So anyways, I apologize, Gladys Reichert, wherever you are, for misquoting you. Okay. So there's kind of two parts of this lecture. So the first one is sort of the rise of fieldwork. And we're going to talk about the early roots of it, the gradual emergence of what we think of as anthropology. We'll talk about kind of early what we call armchair anthropology. We'll talk about sort of the rise of true fieldwork, and then we'll talk about fieldwork today. And for those of you who say, I don't know what the crap fieldwork is, this is my first anthro class, we will be defining that term as we go along, but in this, it will get much more clear. But in the short term, we use fieldwork as basically the primary way in which cultural anthropologists and really linguistic anthropologists do their research. Basically, it means going out, spending time in a community, typically for weeks, if not months, if not years, usually at least months, to really get to know a community, and then using that as where you get your quote unquote data or your information or your knowledge from, to then be able to write about the issues facing that community or the cultures of that community. It's going and being there. So that'll be the first half of the lecture. The second half of the lecture will be kind of mechanics of a research project in anthropology of tourism. So we'll get there in a minute. Don't need to go over the outline on that part, but that's the general plan for the day.